Alright, so as you can probably guess by the title, today we're going to be talking about YA, or Young Adult Fiction. Young adult fiction, or YA as it's commonly known, are stories that are targeted towards readers of the age group between 12 to 18 years old. The term originated in the 1960s and is famous for having their main protagonists fall within that age bracket that creates a closer connection between the reader and the character on the page. Famous works in this genre include The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, The Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyers, one of my personal favorite series, which is the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. If you're interested in why I like it so much, it has to do with their main character, which a video I made on Percy is linked up here if you want to check it out. And though it is hotly debated online, I personally believe the Harry Potter series is included in the young adult genre. When you hear that list, you might find yourself thinking, well, those books weren't so bad, and in fact, they were pretty commercially successful, so what is the point of this video? And you would be forgiven for thinking that, but there is a lot of discourse in the reading community about the validity and purpose of young adult novels. So today, I really wanted to explore the genre's good parts, their bad parts, and the ugly parts to determine, is it one, deserving of as much criticism as it gets, and two, is the genre still worth supporting? So, let's get investigating. Okay, so a little bit of background about me. As you can guess by the number of subscribers that I have, which is a whopping total of 1, I am not a full-time YouTuber. My day job is as a teacher, and I have worked in the inner cities teaching both English and history throughout my tenure. I'm bringing this up because I think it is relevant to the main point of this argument when it comes to the good, which is that young adult novels are good for young readers. If you are pretty early Gen Z or millennial, you probably remember how much independent reading was pushed on us as students. In fact, I guarantee you I'm about to give some of you guys a panic attack when I show you this screen. If you don't know what that is, consider yourself lucky in some regards because that is an AR testing screen. It was a system developed by school systems to encourage independent reading at home. Schools would make you complete a certain number of readings per month or per week based on the number of AR points you would earn from completing a comprehension test on that book. For example, if you read The Cat in the Hat, it might be worth 0.5 AR points. You would read The Cat in the Hat, take the 0.5 AR point test, earn it towards your end goal, which could be like 20 points or whatever. This would encourage you to read complex text, but not stress yourself out with having to read the Iliad by Homer in order to pass. Many of us receive these points through young adult novels, which I think did a great job in building a foundation for many of us to enjoy reading. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, of course, post-pandemic, there was some disturbing data about how schools and reading levels were performing. In particular, after the pandemic, student reading scores plummeted dramatically, with most kids reading about 2 benchmarks below their grade level on average. What I've also noticed is that many students in my class even have developed fears and anxieties related to reading due to lack of trust in their abilities. Our school cycled through many books, but there was one I noticed that really captivated and encouraged students to read while I was teaching. And that was when we were doing our Greek mythology unit, the Percy Jackson series, which we pulled segments of to build some kind of relationship with the idea of Greek mythology. The reasons for this, I believe, are numerous. Many young adult novels, to start with, are easy to pick up and read, not just grammatically, but on a vocabulary level. Typically their narration styles are in the first person point of view, and I think that helps to build a connection between the reader and the author that is telling the story through the character's voice. What I've noticed is that typically in first-person stories, the voice the characters are given are very strong, and it removes this odd barrier that feels like you're being told a story by an outside force, and instead almost like a character that you are becoming friends with, telling you a story about what happened in their lives. Of course, what should be noted is that this can backfire if your character in question has all the personality of a wet cardboard box. But I've found that to be fading, this like blank character that you can transpose yourself on, kind of like, not trying to call out anyone here, but Bella from Twilight. Instead, they have become very actually well-developed characters with their own situations that you almost want to become friends with rather than you want to become themselves. Additionally, YA books can teach simple but valuable lessons in fascinating ways. I think, like, for example, The Hunger Games can give a pretty interesting rebuke of the idea of an over-capitalistic and nationalistic society and the backdraws of that, but it also falls into a pitfall that I think damages the young adult reputation. I think that the Percy Jackson series can give some very interesting dives into the mentality of never giving up or being able to be resourceful or or solving problems through teamwork or never underestimating yourselves. But that's not to say that the series doesn't have any pitfalls of its own that we'll be discussing in a later part of this video. Overall, though, I do think that the lessons given through certain young adult books are very good for young readers, and it helps readers engage with text when the bar isn't set so high, especially for students that are coming out of the pandemic who are struggling to read on grade level. Alright, this brings us into talking a little bit about what is bad about young adult fiction, and the first complaint is that due to the nature of the audience this book is trying to reach, the complexity of certain themes have to be diluted somewhat, and some critics would even argue oversimplified. Young adult novels attempt to write about adult issues while not really capable of diving into the nuance of the situation. While I was researching this video, I found a Quora post by a guy named Mad Wombat, so however you feel about it. But he wrote that anyone old enough to read and understand Hunger Games is better off reading an actual adult dystopian novel like 1984 or Brave New World or many others, and there's no reason to dumb things down for young adults. I have mixed feelings on it. While I do understand where this person is coming from, I do think that there is a certain benefit to having a story line up for where kids and young adults develop throughout time. Nuance is difficult to understand. Most children start off with a very black or white view of the world, and our idea of grayness grows as we grow. So I don't necessarily think that having a slightly diluted adult topic for kids between the ages of 12 to 18 years old is bad. But I do also understand the sentiment of, well, if you are capable of reading Hunger Games, then you should also be capable of reading something that's a little more complex and goes into the diversity. So I wanted to make sure that I outlined that point. Another complaint about the genre that does still hold some weight, but I think is showing improvement on in the YA community, is the lack of diversity. When you think about the very popular YA novels that made it, my favorite included the Percy Jackson series, a lot of the books focus on white characters that are heterosexual, and while there isn't nothing inherently wrong with having characters like that in your book, or even having that person be the main character in your book, there is a certain level of oddity when nobody else in the story has a drop of color to them or diversity to their character. Rick Riordan, a titan in this genre, even acknowledged this flaw in writing his original Percy Jackson series, and in the sequel series Heroes of Olympus, tries his best to fix it by creating some mostly authentic diversity amongst his cast while bringing new life into his stories. For example, we get the addition of Leo and Frank and Piper, and I think that overall these have been benefits to the story as opposed to the tokenism that was Charles Beckendorf. Alright, the final flaw I kind of want to bring up in the bad section is predictability. I think most YA stories tend to follow this tried and true pathway in their novels. A young hero finds a magical weapon or learns that they have come from some kind of fable background and are destined to change the world. Or if not that, then it's some dystopian future where the main character is going to become the leader of this group of rebels fighting against the tyranny of the country or the oppression that they face. And while I have less issues with this point, I will admit that sometimes you can very accurately judge a YA book by its cover. I think that, when you think about like the hero's journey model, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I do agree that there could be a little bit more life being poured into these young adult fiction, and I think that as the diversity of the pool of authors grows, and with self-publishing always continuing to grow, more and more ideas that aren't gate-kept by publishing companies can sprout, and hopefully we will see this situation begin to work itself out as more and more YA work is developed. Alright, now we get into the ugly, and I can describe this whole section basically using one word, and that is trope. And while some tropes, like The Chosen One, are not problematic, although some people may hate them, there are others that are very damaging to impressionable readers. I think some of the most famous examples could be found in the Twilight series, but Twilight is not alone in this. In terms of like newer content that I've digested for awful reasons, The Kissing Booth, which was adapted into multiple movies from books, centers around these bad boy characters that are hyper aggressive and possessive and, what we in modern day would consider physically abusive, and is still desired by the main heroine in the story. And that is really upsetting to see in the young adult genre so prevalently. I also think that the idea of bad boys is not just damaging to young female readers, but young male readers, and it creates this illusion about what these children might become and might believe is necessary to reach their goals, whether that be to gain an excessive amount of wealth or to gain a person that they desire affection. I think that is really damaging. Or the trope of I'm not like other girls, which often depicts girls that fall into or that carry what is considered like stereotypically female things to be like bad or boring. And that's the last thing we want when children pick up a book to read, is to develop the impression that there is something wrong with them because they are not acting the same as the characters in the book. And it's especially damaging when the characters in the book are, if they were people, horrendous people. With that said, I want to get into some closing thoughts. So after hearing about the bad and the ugly of the genre, you might still be wondering why I say we should support it. And no, it is not because I am currently working on writing a YA genre story of my own that is getting published on Wattpad. Link to that story will be in the description. I know this is inopportune timing, but whatever. I say this because it is a genre that I believe, if given time to evolve, can be critical in building back a child's ability to have confidence in their reading post-pandemic. So, sure, there can occasionally be the very predictable storyline and may not expand deeply into themes because they're oversimplified for the sake of being read to children. But what is important is that they are engaging and they are able to facilitate a love for reading in young children better than I think a lot of other genre can. So perhaps they aren't as, they aren't scratching the itch of what a 20-year-old reader would want, but is that important enough to want the genre dead? In fact, I feel like supporting young adult books that aim to tackle the ideas of misogyny or underrepresentation in stories for young adults is critically important and could have a dramatic effect on not just the reading ability for middle school age students, but also influence and create role models for them in the characters that they'll hold dear into their adulthood. So Yeah, you know, a lot of young adult books are rough reads. Some of them are not good. But I still feel like the genre should be supported anyway. If you can, just make sure that you are supporting the right ones because your dollars have influence. And publishers and authors that are looking to make money will focus on what is making money. And if they notice that what's making money are stories that really do tackle these themes in good detail, but not maybe, at a reasonable level of detail, then I think that the young adult genre has a lot of room for growth. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, readers. Hey, so I totally forgot I did not do an end screen thing for this video. So if you enjoyed this video and you would like to learn more about characters that I love, go ahead and click this playlist that leads you to the Why I Love series. And if you are interested in seeing some of my thoughts on books that I've been reading, you can check my book reviews. Until next time, peace out. Thanks for watching.